should not be any force. There should not be any undue influence. Say, for example, a person in authority or in power, and using their power, they can misuse their power, right? Say, for example, an employer, he can misuse his power and authority upon his employee, one of his employee, and then ask that person to enter into an agreement. Now, this is undue influence. Say, for example, that person says, I will not promote you if you don't do this, if you don't agree to this. So employee automatically, I mean, sometimes they can give their consent. So that is undue influence where a person uses his own authority or position. So there can be fraud, there can be misrepresentation, there can be mistake, right? So these are all, some of the instances, where, there may not be free consent, right? So how does the law, deal with these, right? So, basically, right? Basically, we know when there is no consent, then there is no contract, right? So if a person does not give his consent to an agreement, then there is no contract, right? So if there is no consent, classes, right? There is no contract. So because of the fear, of getting, a shot, so this person agrees to it or gives his signs. Now this contract is voidable at his option, right? So he should not leave it, and he should prove that he was forced by this person to sign this particular, promissory note. Then this, contract is voidable contract, right? Now we will see, flaws in consent, right? This particular, there can be, there seems to be a consent, right? But there is a flaw in it. Law prove that there is a flaw in it to the in the court, and then they can avoid it, or they can withdraw from it. Now, see, can you really? You can see here what are the flaws in consent. One is force, coercion. Section 15 deals with that. That is force. Somebody is forcing, right? There is undue influence. Misrepresentation. Now, this misrepresentation deals with that, or willful, right? Section 17 deals with that. And sometimes it can be unintentional. If you see misrepresentation, for example, like, but then I can willfully do it. That is, intentionally I can do it. And sometimes it can be unintentional also, out of innocence, right? A person does not know about it, and then unintentionally, he misrepresents. So that is, say, for example, like you did not even know that a minor should not enter into a contract or agreement. Out of, unintentionally, like, you misrepresent yourself. For example, like, with regards to your ID, or, the date of birth, somebody else had made a mistake in your certificate. You do not know about it. Now, sometimes unintentionally a person can do it. So they can misrepresent. Now, section 18 deals with that. Now, there's another one case where there can be a mistake, right? Now, this mistake, either it can be of law or it can be of fact, right? Now, the mistake can be, it can be a mistake of law, right? Or it can be mistake of facts, like certain, figures are not there. It has to be there, like, maybe it's because of that there's a mistake. Sometimes there's a mistake of law. Now, here with regards to the mistake of law, it can be, of information. That can be a mistake, right? But of our own country, or it can be a foreign country, right? Now, mistake of fact, where there are some informations are missing, right? Or some informations are wrong, then it can be bilateral mistake where two parties, like, both the parties who have entered into a contract or agreement, they can make mistakes, or it can be just one person, can make a mistake. But there are exceptions also where mistake as to the person quoted with, or, to the very nature of contract there is a mistake, right? That is basically wrong. Or it can be like with regards to the people who enter into a contract with, right? So it can be, I mean, very nature of the contract can be, it is a mistake, or maybe, it can be related entering into the contract or agreement, right? Now, when it comes to bilateral mistake, or, where both the parties are making a mistake, now that can be, it can be, to the subject matter, right? So where the very content of it is wrong, right? Or it could be, there is a possibility of performing the contract where, for example, there can be physical impossibility, right? Physically, I mean, it is not possible for a person to enter into a contract, which we have already seen in the last classes, right? Like, competency to enter into a contract, where we found the people who, or who can enter into a contract, right? Now, there is legal impossibility where, I mean, the law does not allow a person, say, for example, a person who is imprisoned, that person cannot enter into a contract. By mistake, if that person enters into a contract or agreement, then the law will come into force, right? Now, when it comes to the subject matter, regarding to the subject matter, if there is a mistake, it could be the existence, or it could be with regards to identity, the quality, or the quantity, or the title of the, title to goods or property, or it could be even the price, right? Now, these are all the flaws that we find in consent, right? When a person gives a consent, there can be, force, there can be undue influence, there can be misrepresentation or mistake. Now we will go into the, one by one, we can just see, what you mean by each of it, and how does the law, treat that particular agreement or contract, right? Now, what do you mean by coercion? We all know in simple terms, it means, force. A person, forces another one to do something, right? So that you call it as coercion, right? And so here is the meaning of it. I mean, according to the law, it is the committing or threatening to commit any forbidden by the Indian Penal Code 1860. I mean, this is the basic definition by law, right? It is a committing, right? A person is, committing something or threatening to commit any act forbidden by the Indian Penal Code, right? So that one you can call it as coercion, or it can be unlawful detaining or threatening to detain any property, right? For example, I am supposed to transfer the property to you, and I don't want to do it, and I threaten you, and I am not doing it, right? Which really belongs to you, right? So I'm not transferring it to you, maybe because of what? Like, maybe I can just force a person and say, like, I will not do it, right? So that, I mean, out of because I threaten, the other person accepts it, right? So threatening to detain any property, right, to the prejudice of any person, then you call it as, coercion, right? Now, coercion, I mean, may not arise out of between both the parties. Now, say for example, like, both of us are entering into an agreement, right? And another person, maybe instead of me, right, another person comes and threatens you at gunpoint, right, and asking you to, sign an agreement, right? Now here, even a stranger, may force a person. I mean, I think a lot of cases we have seen in the country, like, how it happens, right? So even that is voidable contract or voidable agreement, right? Now it includes also fear, physical compulsion, right? So it includes not just signing an agreement, it could be even, fear or physical, compulsion. Now, so this example I already, I told you, right? So one person, threatens another one, if you don't give me money, I will just kill you, I'll shoot you down, right? So the other person, I mean, out of, out of fear, the person agrees and gives money. I have seen cases like, where people are taken ATMs and all that. I think you must have come across, right? And then they pull out your card and then ask you to put the password, and then they, take out the money, right? So here, yes, it is your card, it is your own password, but someone has forced you to transfer the money to their account, right? Now that is what? Out of force. Now here outside it looks that, because no one, only you're eligible to use your own card, your own password, but still, it looks like, you have transferred the money, but then it is not it is not free consent, right? It looks like consent, but then it is not free consent, it is out of force, right? Now, how about, so when you can really call it as, something is, consent has been given out of force, right? When you can really call it, how does it really arise? Now, here we have already seen, the meaning of it, right? The definition itself, we see the meaning where, it is committing or threatening to commit any act forbidden by the Indian Penal Code. Now, here is an example where a young girl of 13 years, her husband has died, right? So when her husband died, all the relatives, they forced her to adopt a boy, right? And they said, we will not cremate your, husband's body until, you give your consent. You agree that you will adopt this boy, right? Now, although she did not want to, adopt that boy, but still out of force, she was forced to do it because they refused, to conduct the funeral or the cremation because, they were waited for her consent. Now, here it was induced by force, by coercion, right? So again, like the adoption was set aside because it was voidable agreement, voidable contract, right? So this is, here is a case, Ranganayakama versus Alvas Sethi, right? So here is the case. The second one is threatening to detain any property, right? I think a lot of cases we must have come across, right? So what if, even if the government or the government party or department, does that to a person, it is voidable, right? Out of force, right? So here is, the government gave a threat of attachment against the property of P, right? For the recovery of fine due from T, that is his son, P's son, had to pay a fine, and they threatened him, for against the property. So P paid the fine, right? So the father has paid the fine because of the threat. Now here, because it is out of threat, the contract was induced by coercion, right? Bansraj versus the Secretary of State. Now this can happen various, cases we have also seen, you might have seen in newspapers also, right? Where, sometimes even, one department, right, can, threaten another person with regards to property or for any other agreement, right? Now, we'll see the effect of coercion, right? What is the effect? So when somebody forces another person to agree, what is the effect? What is the outcome of it, right? So when it is caused by, force or fraud or misrepresentation, the agreement is a voidable agreement. That contract is a voidable contract. Now, why we say voidable contract? We know that we can, go and file a case, and then legally we can fight for it and then, withdraw from it, right? So that is why we call it as void. So if it is proved that, an agreement is made, the consent has been given out of force, right? So you have given your consent out of force, or sometimes even out of misrepresentation or fraud, right? So in that case, say for example, like, in many cases we have seen people are forging their documents, right? So that is fraudulent practice. You go and buy a property, right? You give your consent to give money and all that. And finally, when the document comes to you, and then another person comes and says, this is my property. Now here is something like, someone has played, someone has, used, wrongly used, right? So it's a wrong document, right? So here, the person who is given the consent does not even know. And later on, when it is proved, then they can take it to the court and then deal with that. Section 19 deals with it. Now here is another, case we can see. What if a person threatens to commit suicide? Right? So we see, for example, one person is asking you money and you're not giving it, and suddenly he goes up, he climbs up a big building, and he says, I'll fall down if you don't give me money. Now, out of that force, maybe you will give, right? Because you are scared where the person will die, right? And you give money. How about that agreement? So here you have given your consent and you have given your money, but it is voidable, right? It is voidable because the law treats that as wrong, right? Treats, this threatening to commit suicide. When a person, threatens another person to commit suicide and then enters into an agreement, and even if he, gets the consensus of another person, that is voidable because the law treats it as crime, right? So a threat to commit suicide, it's a crime. According to the law, it is crime, right? So we should understand that, right? Now here is a case where, so a person held out a threat of committing suicide. What he did was he's giving a threat to his wife and son, saying that if you don't give money to my brother, right, execute this release, in favor of my brother, I will commit suicide, right? So with regards to certain property, like here, the husband gives a threat, you will commit suicide. So you do this, with regards to the property to my brother, you just transfer it and, sign this document. Otherwise, I will commit suicide, right? So he threatens his wife and his son, right? So the wife executed the release because of the threat, right? Now here the law, because it is crime, the threat of committing suicide is a crime. So it is avoidable, agreement. Right? So here is a case, Chikam versus Seshama, right? So, but what, you might ask a question, what if a person commits suicide? Now that is beyond, the law. It is out of, that is not, it is not considered as crime according to the law. So when a person commits suicide, already it is done and already it is beyond the reach, right? So the law does not consider it, a person who is committed already, right? Now that particular aspect, the law does not consider it as a crime. But a threat that is given to commit suicide, and out of the threat, any agreement has been made or consensus has been obtained, then it is considered as voidable agreement and voidable contract, right? So we can also, so we will go into undue influence maybe in the next class, right? We will deal with undue influence in the next class. But I hope you have understood what is coercion, right? And what is coercion, and how when a consent has been obtained due to coercion, due to force, when somebody forces another person to give his or her consent for any agreement or for any contract, how does the law deal with that, right? And what if a person commits suicide? Then the law does not, and according to the law, that is not crime, but a threat to commit suicide is considered as crime, right? So one thing we need to understand, all these are voidable contracts and voidable agreement, right? So when all these are coercion, undue influence, and then misrepresentation, all these are voidable contract and voidable agreement. So one thing we know, consent has to be given for any agreement or contract, but that consent should be free consent, right? So when you call it as free, when there is no force, when there is no undue influence, or where somebody uses their authority or power to to get the consents of another person, right? So it should not be, that consent has to be a free consent where the person willingly agrees to it, right? So when you give your consent to an agreement that we make, it should be a free consent, right? So out of your own will, you should give your consents to this particular agreement or contract. You cannot force, I cannot force you to give your consents, right? Or I cannot threaten you to give your consent, right? The threaten could be anything, right? As like somebody can come, to a point of like, at gunpoint asking you to do something, or it should not be even like, if you don't do it, I will commit suicide. No, that is considered as crime, right? So this is with regards to consent, right? So we will see even undue influence. One more thing, I'll just, here I'll stop sharing, and I just want to tell, now I want to tell you like two things. One with regards to the test. I hope ma'am has already informed you. It seems first CA will be conducted by, Charlotte ma'am, and the portion also is Charlotte ma'am's portion. Are you informed about it? Did ma'am inform you? Yes? Do you know
No,
it or not?
she said that she will inform, but we have not received it yet.
Ma'am told me already yesterday itself that the first CA portion will be ma'am's portion, whatever ma'am has taken. Okay, so whatever I am taking, right now, whatever I have taken, right, and I'll be taking, I will conduct it in the second CA, for the second CA, right? So when you
Ma'am, but
conduct,
ma'am has told that you will conduct the first CA and she will conduct the second CA. She
that is
told like
what,
that, ma'am.
yeah, I think this is what she has told in the beginning, right? Yesterday, did she inform you yesterday?
Yes, ma'am. Yesterday she said, ma'am.
And I'll I'll get back to you, right? I think I'll confirm it and get back to you. Now itself I'll confirm. Okay, I think it's better because ma'am told yesterday that it will be. That is one. And second, I hope you are doing your third C also simultaneously, and